Hello and welcome to this MithrilMoney Securities Investment 101 course lecture. This is the 4 main features of a bond lecture 8. Today we're going to talk about 4 things on a bond, the 4 main things you'll see on a bond. So let's just quickly draw up a bond. So we're going to talk about what's called the nominal value. That will usually be something like 100 or 1,000 or some kind of multiple of 10. We'll also talk about the maturity of a bond. So let's say this is going to mature in 2030, and we'll talk about the maturity of a bond. We'll also talk about the coupon. The coupon will be a number printed on the front of the bond. It might say 10%. Well, that will be the coupon. We'll also talk about the issuer. So we'll talk about this is the MithrilMoney fish sauce company. There we are. So those are the 4 things we'll talk about today. So the face value, the coupon, the issuer, and the maturity or the redemption date. So let's get on then with a little story of a bond. Where does a bond come from? Now, if you missed our course introduction, I'll just do a quick recap of where a bond comes from. Here's a company, the MithrilMoney Fish Sauce Company, and it has some shareholders over here who are holding some shares. And these shareholders don't want to put any more equity capital into the company, but the company decides it wants to build a new kind of plant. And that looks more like a database than a plant, but we'll go with that there. And that new plant's going to cost, I don't know, $1 billion. And it decides to borrow the money to raise the money to build the new plant. Okay, that's fine. So what we do is we issue a bond. So we issue a bond, and the bond will be broken up into various lumps of money. So let's say it is $1 billion in total. Well, there'll be little units of that. There's one little unit there. That will be for, say, $100. So what we'll do is we'll sell lots and lots and lots of bonds, valued at a face value of $100 each, until we've raised the full billion. And who will buy these things? Well, the marketplace will buy these things. So there's some interested players over here who want to get involved in this MithrilMoney fish sauce action, and they all buy various amounts of bonds from this issued debt. Okay, that's a quick recap of bonds. Let's get on to the main event then. Let's get onto this thing here. We'll talk particularly about this little unit here, valued at a face value of $100 of debt. So let's just redraw that. Here we are. Now, an important thing about a bond is that it has a face value. It's typically $100. It might be $1,000 in certain cases. But now in the good old days, I want you to imagine that this is the good old days. This would have been a printed piece of paper, and it would have had printed on it $100. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to pay $100 for this piece of paper. This is the face value, the par value, the nominal value. It's printed on the piece of paper, and that's what you will get back at the end, no matter what you pay for it. So we have one of our bond investors over here, and our bond investor there, he's prepared to pay $65 for this bond. And we have another bond investor over here, and she's prepared to pay $66 for this bond. So she gets the bond. We shake hands with her. There's my hand there. There's her hand there. I say my word is my bond, that I will fulfill the terms and the obligations of this particular piece of paper to you, issued in my name. Okay, so forget about him. He was a cheapskate. He didn't offer enough. Okay, but we're still going to give her back, if she holds this piece of paper till the redemption date, we will still give her back $100, even though she only paid $66 for it. So that's an interesting thing we need to be aware of. Now, the other thing about the $100 face value there is the second thing we'll see on there will be a coupon rate. And it will say that, it will say 10%. What that means is we're going to pay her 10% of $100 every year until the redemption date is fulfilled. In 1975, the Sex Pistols were formed, so that's probably the most important date of all time. Let's imagine that this bond was issued in 1975. Okay, now it will have a redemption date on there. So the redemption date will say something like this. It will say 1985. Now that's 10 years after the issue date. So what that means is that our lady here, we'll call her Penelope, why not? She is going to get $10 a year for 10 years, 10% of $100. And finally, after the end of 10 years, she will get the full $100. If we do a little timeline down the bottom here, so there's year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. She's going to get $10 there, $10 there. I should have done this 5 years, shouldn't I? Not to worry. Let's just go along and do it now that we're here. So $10, $10, and $10. Notice she gets $10. Didn't quite draw that right. She gets $10 in the final year too. Another important thing is in the final year, when the bond matures, she also gets back the $100 face value too. So she's going to get 11 cash flows. Oh, by the way, just an important point. In most of the Western world, she'll get this 10% semi-annually. She'll get $10 split twice a year. It's called semi-annual payments. So she'll get $5 after 6 months and $5 after another 6 months. But we're going to call this an annual bond. So she's going to get the full $10 once a year. We'll discuss the finer points of that in a later lecture. She might get payments monthly. She could get payments quarterly. She could get payments semi-annually, often written down as SA, semi-annual, or annually. There are also other exotic flavours of more esoteric bonds, which we'll cover in later lectures. But in the Western world, she'll mainly get payments semi-annually, so she'll get $5, then $5. However, we're going to stick on this lecture to annual because it makes my drawing life a lot easier. So she's going to get $10 a year for 10 years, and at the end of the 10 years, she's also going to get the face value back. Now remember, she never paid that in the first place. She paid $66. But she will get the face value back at the end of the 10 years. So we'll call that T0 or today. So all those payments will be coming to her over time. I won't draw all of these. Okay, so 11 payments coming back to her over the 10 years, with the last 2 payments being at the same point in time. So effectively that's a payment of $110 on the last day when the bond matures in 1985. Remember, we're starting in 1975 here. Okay, I think we've pretty much covered most of what we need to cover there, which is good. One thing about a bond, which is different from a share, I'll just mention it here. When a company has some shares, as long as this company exists, those shares will kind of be immutable. They will last forever as long as the company exists. So they will be unchanging. They'll be like perfect robots. The thing about a bond is, as the Greek philosopher Herodotus said, it's a bit like a river. It's changing every single day because it's constantly getting closer to its kind of maturity. So, you know, if we have to say that this is 10 whole years, and there is the redemption, the bond will be moving through time. Every single day it will be getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to redemption. So it'll be like the River Thames starting up in the kind of Wiltshire Hills, gradually getting closer and closer to the North Sea. So just like a river's always changing, you can't step into the same river twice. A bond's nature is changing every single day until it reaches the North Sea and it expires, it matures, it disappears. So bonds are different from shares in that particular way, and it's something you must be aware of. And again, bonds must be repriced every single day because their natures are changing every single day. So do be aware of that difference between bonds and shares. Okay, so these payments down here, What these represent is a series of cash flows. Now this is going to be what's called fixed income, so it's fixed income cash flows. So those, again, this one really is really lumped together, but it's two logically, but it's generally lumped together into the one there. These cash flows here are the coupons. Now in the good old days, back in say Victorian times, the reason it's called coupons is they were literally coupons. So what they would have been, I don't know if I've got 10 exactly here, so that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. There would have literally been some coupons, like kind of postage stamp coupons, and every year you would have ripped one of those off. It would have been dated, that would have said 1976, $10, and you took it down a post office, or you posted it into the company, and then they sent you back the $10. That last coupon there, when you ripped it off, that would be dated 1985, and it would say $110. You'd rip that off, you'd send it in, and then you'd be sent back $110, or you take it down a post office or a bank and they'd hand it over and they would hand you the $110. So that's why it's called the coupon rate. In the good old days, it literally was a series of coupons that you ripped off. Now remember that that last one is important for later lectures. That last one is two coupons in disguise, really. It's the $10 coupon, the last one, and the $100 coupon. The principal repayment kind of wrapped up into one particular single payment. And that's going to be important later in a later lecture when we talk about something called strips. So do be aware of that. Now I think we've covered most of the things on here now, haven't we? So we've covered the redemption date, 10 years after the formation of the Sex Pistols, the greatest rock and roll band in the world. We've talked about the coupon rate, or the interest rate. Now that's not based on what you pay for it, it's based on the face value that's printed on the bond. And that gives you all the different coupons, a series of cash flows. Just go back to those cash flows down the bottom of that screen there. Now we've missed off one thing. Oh, an important point, remember, of course. I just need to reiterate this. Let's say our Lady Penelope gets bored of waiting for all of this money. So she gets bored about there. What's that, about 1979, when Margaret Thatcher got elected as Prime Minister, I believe. Let's say she gets bored. Well, she could hand the bond to the company and say, can you give me the $100 now, please? I'm bored. And they'll usually say no. So here's the company. Here's their bond they issued. It says 1985 on it. The year is actually 1979. Here's Penelope. And she goes to the company and says, can you just take this bond off my hands and give me back the $100? They say no. She can sell that bond to someone else. So she can find someone else over here. Here's Cedric. And he buys it off her hands. Now what he pays her is nothing to do with the company. That's just between him and Penelope. And how he will value the bond is he will value that bond on the remaining cash flow. So he'll get out a calculator or an Excel spreadsheet and he'll take a look at those 6 cash flows of 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 and 110. And then at this point in time, as he buys it off Penelope, he will value those cash flows in whatever way he wants. He could just make up a number off the top of his head if he wants. And then if she agrees, and she thinks that's a good price, then she'll sell the bond to him. So she can always get rid of the bond and transfer that security to someone else. And then in let's say he keeps hold of it, and the year changes to 1985, then the company will have paid him all of these cash flows, and then they will pay him that final cash flow of 110 as well in 1985, and then the bond will cease to exist. Now there's one last thing we haven't covered. Just get rid of these cross signs. The one thing we haven't covered here is the issuer. I'll just try and squeeze that in there. So who issued this bond? Now we do know it was the MithrilMoney Fish Source Company, so that would be written down there somewhere. So let's just get rid of that. So the MithrilMoney Fish Source Company, that will be written down. Now that's important. Why is that important? Well, what we'll do is we'll create 3 identical bonds. And they're all issued at the same time, and they're all going to be paid off at the same time. So they're all $100 face value. They're all 10%. They're all annual. They are all starting in 1975 and maturing in 1985. So to all intents and purposes, they are clones. They are identical, except they're not clones. So this is the MithrilMoney Fish Source Company. We're talking about dollars here. So this is the US Treasury. The final one there is Jim Widkins Circus. So Jim Widkins Circus, the US Treasury, and the MithrilMoney Fish Source Company. They look the same, but should we pay the same for each of these? We'll just assume that we know what all of these terms are here. Just to tidy up the diagram a bit. So would you pay the same for those things? No, you're not going to, because some of them have, in terms of dollars, different risk. Now, in terms of dollars, the lowest risk is probably the US Treasury, in terms of US dollars, I should say, because they can legally print them. If I, running the MithrilMoney Fish Source Company, print US dollars, then I am counterfeiting and I will probably go to jail. But when the US Treasury gets their friends in the Federal Reserve to print dollars to buy their debt, that's called quantitative easing, and it's perfectly acceptable. So in terms of dollars, and we'll forget about any chances of hyperinflation or anything, in terms of actual dollars, even if dollars can't even buy you anything, the safest bet there is the US Treasury. So we actually run another company. We run the MithrilMoney Ratings Agency. Now, we're independent. We don't take money from corporations for rating bonds or rating corporations. We're completely independent in that way. And you don't know which one of these bonds to buy, and you don't have a kind of risk analytics department. So you just pay the MithrilMoney Ratings Agency for their opinion on each of these different bonds. And they give you their opinion, and you trust that opinion. So they're going to rate the US Treasury as AAA in terms of dollars. They're not going to make any recommendations about hyperinflation or what a dollar will be worth or what the purchasing value of a dollar will be. They're going to rate the MithrilMoney. Now, they're totally independent, so they're giving you an unbiased, completely unbiased opinion to keep their reputation, which is the most important thing in finance. So they're going to rate the MithrilMoney Fish Source Company at B. And the Jim Widkins Circus, they're going to rate at a measly C rating. Now, these ratings are generally, straightforward in the kind of brave new world fashion of alpha, beta, gamma. So A, B, and C. And what this means is that the US Treasury in terms of dollars is low risk. I'll call this baby risk. The MithrilMoney Fish Source Company, we'll just move the ratings agency away because they're completely independent, is BB, so we'll call this mummy risk. And the Jim Widkins Circus is, oh dear, is daddy risk. Okay, so this is baby bear. This is mummy bear. Slightly fierce, retractable claws, so slightly dangerous. Okay, there's mummy bear. We'll make her pretty by giving her eyelashes. There we are. Let's recalibrate my pen. And here's daddy risk. Very dangerous. Okay, very scary. Lost an ear. Wearing a patch. Bloodshot eyes from all the whiskey. Teeth. Slobbering. Huge arms. Huge legs. Okay. Huge, sharp, pointy kind of thing. That's the worst bear I've ever seen in my life, but hopefully that makes a bit of sense. Okay, so we've got baby risk AA, we've got mummy risk BB, and we've got daddy risk. Now remember, they all have the same face value on them, $100. The only thing that's different is the issuer name. So what are you going to pay for these things? Well, let's say the US Treasury, you're prepared to pay 105. You just decide, given the level of risk, and given the 10% coupon, and given it's the US Treasury, which can ask the governor of the Federal Reserve to print some money in quantitative easing and buy those bonds back off you in case of emergencies, you're prepared to pay $105. So your basic, that's called a premium bond. So you're paying over the odds. We'll work out the consequences of that in a future lecture. For the MithrilMoney Fish Source Company, given this completely unbiased rating of the MithrilMoney Ratings Agency, you're prepared to pay $100, which is exactly the same as the face value, which is just a coincidence. But that would be buying at par. So if you're a golfer and you're going round the Augusta golf course and the course says 80 and you get round in 80, that would be at par. So this is the same sort of thing. It says 100 and you pay 100. That's unusual, and it's more of a coincidence than a meant thing. And for the Jim Widkins circus down here, with the C rating, the daddy risk rating, you're going to say, I'm only prepared to pay 85 for that one because of this C rating. So the issuer is important. Who the issuer is important. Where you got your rating from is important. So what you've got to try to find is an independent ratings agency which isn't taking its money from the companies that are issuing the bonds in the first place, and there aren't very many of those, so do look out for that, or you work it out for yourself. And these days, because of the events of 2007, lots of people are working out their own ratings for companies when they buy their bonds rather than believing the opinions of ratings agencies. So do look out for that. That is important. But that will vary the price you pay for the particular bond. Anyway, I think that's enough of an introduction. Let's move on, and in the next lecture we'll talk about the consequences of paying different prices for these bonds which look the same, and we'll talk about yields. So look forward to that, and I'll see you next time.